Chapter 18 of Sisters. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Lucy Burgoyne. Sisters by Ada Cambridge. Chapter 18. Rose had never been reckoned a person of importance by her family, but now that she was gone, there remained a terrible emptiness where she had been. She was one of those unselfish, good-natured members of households to whom falls the stocking mending, the errand-going, the fetching and carrying, the filling of gaps generally, and at every turn Deb and Frances missed her unobtrusive ministrations, which they had accepted as much matters of course as the attentions of the butcher and baker. It was presently perceived that Keziah missed her too, that Keziah, who had loyally opposed the plebeian marriage, was becoming a turncoat and renegade, blessing where she should have cursed, blaming where she should have praised, yes, blaming even Queen Deborah, who, needless to say, took her head off for it. It had been Keziah's own choice to follow the sisters into exile, and to share the privations involved in their change of life. She had given up her Redford luxuries and importance to become a general servant, with only her kitchen to sit in, for their sakes, and she had cheerfully abided by her choice until Rose went. Rose was the one who had understood the cost of the sacrifice, and who had lighted it by sympathetic companionship. They had cleaned rooms, and made cakes and puddings, and set hens, and stirred jam, and ironed frocks and laces together. They had spent hours in pleasant gossip over the many homely subjects that interested both. Their relation had been more that of a mother and daughter than of servant and mistress, regarding her as virtually her child. Keziah had been quick to spring to the side of authority in the matter of the irregular love affair. The natural parental impulse was to nip it in the bud, but Providence had decided the issue in this case, and a flirtatious girl was one thing, and a respectable married woman another. And Keziah was lonely, and felt neglected and put upon, when nobody came to talk to her in her kitchen, or to help her with her cooking and ironing, and particularly after she had told Deb that it was a shame to bear malice to Miss Rose now, and Deb had commanded her to mind her own business. She was suspected of treacherous visits to the house next door. She was known to have spent Sunday afternoons with Mrs Peter herself. The iniquity of these proceedings was in secrecy she observed, or tried to observe, regarding them. It was she who knew, before anybody else, when a baby Breen was coming, and if a married woman was a personage to Keziah, an incipient mother was being of the highest rank. She had forgiven Mary everything for the sake of her black-eyed boy. Now she took the news that Rose was what she called interesting to Deb, and demanded that action should be taken upon it, with an air that was almost truculent. Deb, of course, did not believe in being spoken to, even by Keziah, in that way. "Has the muffin boy been?" she inquired, with a steady look. "It's too soon yet, and I can tell you, Miss Deb, that if it was you in her place, she wouldn't keep it up like this, and at such a time too. When the muffin boy comes, Keziah, please pay him the sixpence we owe him from last week. You will find the money on my writing table." "Well, I don't care. I call it a shame not to go to her." "Perhaps you would like to go to her yourself." Deb swiftly changed her tone. "I'd like nothing better," the old woman retorted, with spirit, "if you are agreeable." "I am perfectly agreeable." "Well, it was only the other day she said she'd give anything to have me. if it wasn't for taking me away from you." "Oh, pray don't consider that. I can easily get somebody else," said Deb affably, though her surprise at the idea of Keziah wanting to leave her was only equalled by her dismay. Keziah, already surprised to find herself of so much less consequence than she had supposed, said that, if that was the case, she'd go and see Miss Rose about it. "You can go now," said Deb. "Thank you, Miss Deb, I will," said Keziah, "as soon as I have cleared up. Would a month's notice suit you? I don't wish to put you about at all." "A month will be ample," said Deb. "A week, if you like." "I'll see what Miss Rose says," said Keziah. Rose, after the interview, wrote affectionately to Deb, to say she would not dream of taking Keziah if Deb wanted her. Deb wrote affectionately to Rose, to say that she would be rather glad than otherwise to make the change, as the work was too much for such an old woman. So Keziah went over to the Bream camp, where she had comfort and companionship, and her own way in everything, and Deb began to experiment with the common or garden general as purveyed by Melbourne registry offices. She loathed these creatures, one and all. They were of a race unknown at Redford, and she was singularly unlucky in the specimens that fell to her, although some of them could have been made something of by a mistress who knew how to do it. It is only fair to state that they loathed her, for a finicking, unreasonable, stuck-up poor woman, who gave herself the airs of a wealthy lady. They came at the rate of 2 a month, and each one as she passed seemed to leave the little house meaner, dingier, more damaged than before. It was not living, it was pigging, Frances said, and Deb agreed with her, although when Keziah ventured to call one day to inquire into the state of things, Deb calmly asserted that all was well. In despair she tried a lady help, in the person of Miss Keene, dying to return to her dear family, from relations who did not want her, on any terms. "Whatever we ask her to do we must do ourselves," said Deb to grumbling Frances, who seemed never willing to do anything. "And of course we shall have to get a washwoman and a charwoman to scrub, but it will be cheaper in the end. And oh, anything rather than sticky door handles and greasy spoons, and those awful voices hailing one and all over the house." But it was not cheaper, nor was the arrangement satisfactory in any way after the first fortnight. Miss Keene, spoiled at Redford as they had been, was as unfit for crude housework, and she aggravated her incompetence by weeping over it. She had not gathered from Deb's letters that the change in the family fortunes was as great as it is now proved to be, and Deb had not anticipated the effect of adversity upon one so easily depressed. She had no heart, poor thing. She struggled and muddled, sighing for flowers for the vases while the beds were unmade, and when she saw a certain look on Deb's face, wept and mourned and gave up hope. So they pigged still, although they did not defile the furniture with unwashed hands, and the plate and crockery with greasy dishcloths. With no knowledge of cookery, they lived too much on tinned provisions, a diet as wasteful as it was unwholesome, feeding their wash and scrub women with the same, and their efforts to support the burden of their domestic responsibilities deprived them of outdoor exercise and mental rest, and recreation kept them at too close quarters with one another, each rubbing her quivering prickles upon the irritable skins of the other two. Frances bore the strain with least good nature and self-control, and since she had to vent her ill humour on someone, naturally made Miss Keene her victim when it was a choice between her and Deb.